Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 17 preview where I'll discuss some of the key players that you should be looking to buy and sell in your FPL teams. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, in today's video, I'm going to keep it nice and simple. There's going to be three main sections looking at the best defenders, midfielders and forwards to buy at the moment, especially at those price points a little bit cheaper. And we are going to start in a slightly backwards order with the midfielders because I just feel like this is such a key decision for a lot of people this week. I think a lot of people are trying to free up funds to bring in the likes of maybe a Trent or an Arsenal defender, or maybe more so this week, someone like Alexander Isak, or maybe you're still aiming to get one of the premium assets in. Regardless, with the amount of good, expensive options we have right now, and that's not even considering Erling Haaland, it does make a lot of sense to own at least one cheap midfielder. But myself and a lot of others are starting to look at a structure where it's Salah, Palmer, Saka, and then two cheap midfielders. And so for that reason, it's worth discussing, are there at least two that are worth owning? And I'll be honest, all of the options on this list are absolutely fine to hold, own, and to have in your teams, even Semenyo, who we will move on to in a second. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth considering a structure where you have at least one cheap midfielder. So, who's the best one to have? I have tried to not sit on the fence here. So as you can see in the final column of the table, I've got my Raptor ranking, which is essentially if I were to buy one afresh this week without seeing your team, without knowing your budget, etc., taking into account everything, who would I buy this week? But elsewhere in the table, we've got minutes per game over the last 5 game weeks. And the reason I've gone over the last 5 game weeks is that is when Amorim joined Manchester United. And it's also the week that Enzo went into a more advanced role. And he's been playing on a consistent basis. So I think the last 5 weeks gives us a little bit of an idea about recent trends. We've also got their XG per 90 and their XA per 90 over the last 5, looking at goal threat and assist threat. I've got the fixture difficulty. This is actually according to me, not Fantasy Football Hub. So I've just ordered them from 1 to 6 in terms of the players here based on my outlook of the fixtures. I've then got, are they on set pieces? So are they on any set pieces for their team? Corners, free kicks, penalties, anything like that. And then, like I said, the Raptor ranking. So straight up, and this might be a little bit of Manchester United bias, but I don't think so. I don't think there's that much anyway. And I would probably say that AMAD Diallo would be top choice for me. It's very difficult with AMAD because even since Amorim's come in, if you look at his data, goal threat's nothing to write home about. And he's not even been that creative. I know he's picked up the assists, but in terms of is he creating lots of high quality chances, he's not necessarily doing so. But a lot has changed with AMAD, right? With AMAD, now not only is he looking like our best performer by some distance, but in the game against Man City and also the game before that wasn't obviously in the Premier League, he moved into an advanced number 10 role. I think based on his quality on the ball and how good he was in that number 10 role against City, I don't see any reason why he would now be put back into that wing-back role. Like, we have other players that can play that wing-back role. Even Antony, by the way, he's come on in the last 2 games and played the wing-back role very well. We know Mazraoui can play it too. We know we've got Dallo. I just think it's such a waste to see AMAD in that right wing-back role. So I think he plays as the number 10. My concern has always been if AMAD moves to the number 10, well, then you've got lots of competition, right? Because you've got Garnacho, Rashford, Bruno, Mount, and Xerxes. Now, firstly, I think Xerxes is just not good enough as the 10 on the ball, so he will play as the 9, I think, rotating with Højlund. I think Mason Mount was brilliant in the 10 role, but sadly he's picked up an injury. We don't know when he'll be back, and we don't know if he'll be able to stay fit. So that's one less player in the 10 role. We know that Rashford and Garnacho were both left at home for the Man City game, and therefore they clearly don't look like they're in favour with Amorim. We know that apparently, I'm recording this on Thursday morning, Garnacho has been included in the squad for the Spurs game, but Rashford has not. So Rashford looks like he's on his way out probably. Garnacho's clearly not in favour. Mason Mount's injured. That's a long-winded way of saying we basically only have 2 number 10s, which is Bruno and AMAD. And we know that Bruno doesn't even necessarily play every game as a 10. So I don't think AMAD is fully nailed on to the point where he will not be rested in a single game, but he is most certainly first choice, and we don't really have too many options to play in that position. Like, I don't think Antony will play that advanced, and like I said, I just don't really rate Xerxes in that number 10 position. So AMAD's minutes have gone from being pretty secure to very secure. He's gone from playing right wing back to number 10, and for those reasons, I just really rate him as an asset now, and I think he's probably, along with Ismail Assar and maybe Semenyo, got the highest goal threat on this list. I know the data doesn't support that, but like I said, it's been such a recent change that we're going to have to wait 5 or 6 weeks for the data to catch up. So for that reason, I think AMAD is top. But I don't think Enzo's far off. And now, again, this might seem quite biased because I own Enzo. I bought Enzo last week, putting him in second. But the reason for Enzo being that high up is mainly that he is the only one on set pieces. So he takes pretty much every in-swinging set piece for Chelsea from the left-hand side. That includes corners and some free kicks as well. But basically every corner from that side, Enzo is taking. And he's the only one on this list over the last 5 to have played 90 in every single game. He's the club captain in the absence of Reece James. And what I like about Enzo is he feels like he has comfortably the most routes to points. And what I mean by that is he's got a great shot from outside the box. He is still arriving in the box. You can see here he's got the joint third highest XG per 90. And he's extremely creative, like comfortably the highest expected assist per 90 on this list. He's got a great passing range. He's on the set pieces as well. Also, I think when Palmer's not on the pitch, which, by the way, it's very rare that Palmer's not, but Enzo could be second choice penalty taker as well. The fixtures are there to attack. I think Enzo is arguably as good as AMAD. The only reason I've got him slightly lower is I just think with AMAD in that advanced sort of number 10 role, he's going to get into the box a lot more and have a lot more chances to score goals than Enzo. But Enzo's going to create more chances. And because of the set pieces, Enzo doesn't have to have a brilliant FPL game. I'll point to last week, and by the way, he played very well last week, but one pass through to Jackson and he picks up a return. By the way, he created a great chance from a set piece too. One good corner and he can pick up an assist. So my way of viewing this, I think AMAD will blank in more weeks than Enzo, but I think AMAD will haul in more weeks than Enzo. I reckon AMAD's scores could be like 10-2, 11-5, 13-2, whereas I think Enzo is very likely to be sort of 5-6, 5-6, 3-2, 5-6, something like that, where he's probably not going to go massive. So it really depends what you're looking for, but for me, they are these standout 2 options. Just to discuss some of the other ones quite briefly, AWOBI I have put in third. If you were to ask me next week, AWOBI wouldn't be in third. It's purely due to that entry point of Southampton at home. So that is the only reason he's there, because look at his XG and XA per 90 over the last few. He's got the second lowest goal threat, and he's got the joint lowest assist threat. The thing that I love about AWOBI is the fixtures and the minutes. That is pretty much it. It doesn't have any routes to points in terms of pens, set pieces. He's more expensive than Enzo and AMAD. So the only reason he's there is it's a great entry point, and I really like the fixtures, and you know that he's going to start every game. I've got Ismail Assar in fourth. If you were to ask me in game week 19, I think Ismail Assar would probably be first for me. Because he plays, is it Southampton? Let me just double check that before I lie to you. But yeah, in game week 19, he's got Southampton. Then it's Chelsea, but then it's Leicester, West Ham, Brentford. So in the space of 5 weeks, Southampton, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, some of the weakest defences in the league. You can see here he's got comfortably the best XG per 90 on this list. His minutes have been so secure. Even in the EFL Cup against Arsenal, Mateta and Eze come off early. Ismail Assar stays on the pitch once again. So I feel like for his price to have, look at that goal threat. I mean, it's so much better than anyone else on this list. He's even pretty creative too. The fixtures, I mean, let's jump over. We can actually have a quick look at the fixtures for Ismail Assar, because this is the big issue, right? Is that longer term, I love them, but you don't want to enter against Arsenal at home. And even Bournemouth away is not a great entry point. And then it's Chelsea in 20. I mean, you do get this fixture against Southampton in 19. Then it's a really nice run. I mean, you're pretty happy, honestly, until like 31. Because the only slightly difficult fixtures there are Newcastle and Villa. But for an attacker, you're quite happy. So I think Ismail Assar's great. It's just that entry point. So yeah, if you ask me in game week 19, Ismail Assar might genuinely be top of the list. But as of right now, I can't put him there just because of the entry point. To discuss the other 2 players that a lot of people own, but are maybe getting sick and tired of, Rodgers and Semenyo. This could be a little bit of like shiny new toy bias. Like we don't have any of the other form. We've owned Rodgers and Semenyo for so long. But I do think both of them are underperforming. Like look at Rodgers' data in recent weeks. He's got the lowest goal threat on this list. He's got a little bit of creativity, but we're not talking about a massive amount here. It's just really poor data. The great thing about Rodgers is he continues to get pretty good minutes every single week. But as you can see on this list, actually, Rodgers and Semenyo over the last 5 at least have the joint lowest minutes per game. I mean, they're still very good minutes, but one of the benefits of Rodgers and Semenyo was the minutes were so good for such a cheap price, but the 4 other assets we can consider all have pretty good minutes. And on Semenyo, he did pick up a hamstring issue in the last game, which is why he was subbed early. Iraola suggested it was hamstring tightness, not a hamstring injury, so maybe he'll be fine. But even the data for Semenyo has dropped off a little bit. So for all of those reasons, that's almost 10 minutes then on those cheap midfielders. I just feel like if you're looking for like high upside, I think AMAD and Ismail Assar are the two to go for. And I think most people would agree on this, just due to the fact that they are playing so much closer to goal. Like, they're both playing as a very advanced number 10s. Even for Palace, by the way, because of Munoz and Mitchell overlapping, Sarr basically plays a very similar role to AMAD on that right side. So they're both going to get very close to goal. And as a result, I think they'll both have the highest goal threat on this list. And for that reason, they're going to have the most chance of going out there and getting you big scores. In terms of ticking along, it's probably Enzo and IWOBI, and I would put Enzo quite a bit above that, just because Enzo is playing for Chelsea, who are a much better attack, and because of the set pieces. So if I were going to buy a midfielder this week, it would be AMAD or Enzo, and I would just about favour AMAD. However, if you're looking in the long term, and you're thinking, I don't want to change this player for the next 5 or 6 weeks, maybe even beyond that, maybe you could go early on Ismail Assar. It's just not a great entry point. I will just say one more thing, which is you also need to consider who else you own. So for me, I already owned Rodgers, and therefore I looked at Enzo because Enzo and Rodgers rotate really well. But IWOBI and Rodgers also rotate well. AMAD and Rodgers don't rotate quite as well, but AMAD and Enzo do. So it also depends who your 4th/5th midfielder is that you're bringing in to rotate with, because what you don't want is a benching headache in some weeks, and then in other weeks, you don't really want to play either of them. You ideally want one of them in each week to have a decent fixture. I think all 6 of these players you could conceivably own and expect points from. And I would love to know, going into Game Week 17, which of these, and if it's 2, which 2 are you likely to own in your own teams? So as this person says, we have discussed the cheap defenders a lot in FPL. It seemingly feels like it's every single week, but that is for good reason, because every week we get more information around teams, players, expected minutes, but also the fixtures are changing on a weekly basis, of course, and therefore the entry point for players changes. I'll use Lewis Hall as the example. Last week was a brilliant entry point for him because you got Leicester and Ipswich, and the Leicester at home game was the best game they've got for like 5 or 6 game weeks, potentially even longer than that. Whereas now, I'm not saying he's a bad option, and we will discuss him, but the entry point isn't quite as good. So every week we will update our thinking around the best cheap defenders. Just to answer the first part of the question, or the other part of the question before we talk about the cheap defenders, is it worth having just an expensive back line? Should we just be avoiding the cheap defenders altogether, going for like 3 premiums, and then just having 2 cheapies that we just never play, so it doesn't really matter who they are? There is some merit in this. The other way that I would look at this, though, is what are you sacrificing by doing that? If your team value is so insane that you can go for 3 premium defenders from Liverpool and Arsenal, and you can have the midfield you want, and you can have the front line you want, then maybe it's worth considering. And I would say, as we've just discussed in the previous section, the addition of the likes of Enzo and AMAD offering really good value, it might allow you to do that. For me, though, I think the sweet spot when I'm looking at overall structure and what you can afford is probably 2 premium defenders, and that may well also include your goalkeeper. So if you're sat there right now and your only premium defender is Gabriel, you've got like Verbruggen in goal, Gabriel, and then 2 cheap defenders, yeah, do you know what? It might be worth trying to find a way to like downgrade a mid-price midfielder like Mbeumo to bring in someone like, whether it be Timber, Trent, Raya, whoever you go for, just to shore up that defense a little bit. But I feel like when you start getting to 3 or 4, for me, that just makes the attack a little bit weaker, and it probably means you are going without an Isak or without a Saka, and then at that point, I would rather try and find a balance. So I think 2 premium defenders is probably a good spot to be in. So if you're sat there right now with 1, maybe look to bring in a second. If you're already sat there with 2, I think you can get away with a cheaper goalkeeper, maybe a cheap 3rd defender, because they could offer really good value. So let's discuss the best defender. So what I'm actually going to do is a little bit more sort of relaxed format. Is I'm just going to go through some of the best defenders, looking at their fixtures in particular, because for me, even more so the midfielders and forwards, fixtures are so important for defenders and for defences. Like over the last 6, Wolves are one of the best attacks in the league, believe it or not, for expected goals conceded. And you might not believe that, but that's because of the fixtures that they've had. And so even if a defence isn't perfect, if they've got good fixtures, their defensive data will improve. And even a really good defence, as we saw at the start of the season with Arsenal, you give them trickier games and they will struggle a little bit more. So, fixtures are king. I will just start with saying I owned Ait-Nouri in Game Week 16, so I got the -2. And as you can see, Ait-Nouri isn't in my team, and in his place is Anthony Robinson. So the first team that I want to discuss is Fulham. And I do think Robinson's the standout. Something that is incredibly valuable. Like we keep needing to replace our bloody cheap defenders, don't we? Due to rotation, injuries, fixtures, just not playing for the best defence or not having the attacking threat we thought. Anthony Robinson is so consistent, mainly due to the minutes. In 22-23, he had 35 starts. You can see here at the bottom here. And in 23-24, he had 37 starts. That means in back-to-back seasons, this man has had 3,000 plus minutes. In the 22-23 season, not as attacking, he had 2 assists. Last season, he had 6 assists. Then we move on to this season. He has started and played 90 minutes in all 16 of their games, and he's already on 6 assists. So what I immediately like about Robinson, ignore the Fulham defence and the fixtures, he just plays every game, and he's got a bit of assist threat. But then when you also look at Fulham this season, are top 8 for non-penalty expected goals conceded. And if you look at the fixtures, you can pretty much start him every week. The only difficult fixture is Game Week 18. But outside that, you've got Southampton, Bournemouth and Ipswich. 3 home games in the next 4. The away games after that are against West Ham and Leicester. Man United are struggling in attack a little bit. Forest aren't a particularly great attack. So I look at this run of fixtures. I mean, look at it. To that game at 28. You can basically start Robinson every week. The only one I really wouldn't want to is 18, but if I refer back to my own team, and by the way, my team selection video will be out tomorrow morning, Friday morning, I can play, hopefully, assuming that he's available, and it's the early kickoff, by the way, so we might get a team leak, Rico Lewis against Everton at home. So the only one week I wouldn't really like to start Robinson, I can start Rico Lewis. And honestly, if Rico Lewis isn't going to start or I don't want to risk it, I'll just play Anthony Robinson. We just saw him get 2 assists against Liverpool. He had really good data. So I like him for all of those reasons. I brought him in before he went up in price, though. He's now at 4.8 million. If he starts to get towards sort of like 5, 5.1, 5.2, it's going to get to a position where he's not worth it. So the player that I'm extremely interested in, but at the time of recording, I don't actually have an update on, is Joachim Andersen. 4.2 million. I mean, that is mind-blowing for a defender playing for one of the best defences in the league with great upcoming fixtures. And this season, Joachim Andersen's goal threat has been non-existent, right? He's not played that many games, only 9 starts, but he's not shown it. But in recent seasons, like, he's had some attacking threat. Last year for Palace, 2 goals, 3 assists. 5 attacking returns isn't bad. So I almost feel like already he's probably worth the 0.6 million saving, but we need him to obviously be available this week. And at the moment, I don't know if he will be. So I really like Fulham defence. And what I've done, actually, I've just made a watch list on the FPL site. So we'll just go through a couple of them. Milenkovic is mainly the fixtures, right? He's clearly shown he's got a lot of attacking threat. 0.17 XG. Just to put that into perspective, 0.17 XG per 90. Gabriel's is 0.13. You're telling me Milenkovic has more goal threat than Gabriel. And I'm not saying he's better in the air, but in terms of the quality of chances this man's getting, it's good. The fixtures just are a bit of a mixed bag. If he rotates well with your existing defence, though, 4.6 million. Forest are still 3rd for non-penalty expected goals conceded. The fixtures are unbelievable. And sorry, I don't know why that graphic keeps flashing, but I really like the idea of Milenkovic. I would definitely go Milenkovic over Ola Aina. I know Lewis Hall will be in a lot of people's thinking. It comes down to, can you rotate him? These 3 fixtures here aren't great for defenders. Man United is not bad, actually, but I expect Villa and Spurs to definitely score. I kind of expect Ipswich to score when they're playing at home as well. I just don't love these fixtures for the defenders. I really like them for Gordon and Isak, because these aren't defences that will necessarily keep them out. I think Lewis Hall is absolutely fine, especially if you can rotate him in the likes of maybe Game Week 20 and maybe 18, 19. If you've already got, I don't know, let's say you've already got Anthony Robinson and you can rotate them in and out, but then even that rotation doesn't work very well. I really think it comes down to, can you rotate Lewis Hall? If not, I don't think he's a defender that you'd want to bring in and start every week, but he's got so much creativity. We know that his data is really solid. 0.17 expected assists. He is more creative than Robinson, I would say, despite having fewer assists. He's playing probably for a slightly weaker defence, although Newcastle have shown some signs of improvement. So yeah, I have no issue with Lewis Hall. I just think it's probably not the perfect time to bring him in. I think when I would like to bring him in, probably ideally, is Game Week 21. Outside of that, I think the Bournemouth defenders are really good options. So Milos Kerkez is up to 4.7 now. In terms of creativity, the numbers aren't great, but when you watch the games, I really try and incorporate as much eye test as I can so that I'm not completely database. When you watch the game, Kerkez always looks like he's very close to getting involved in the goals. So, or at least creating chances. He's very high up the pitch, and his minutes have been really good. He started all 16 games this season. But then you've got Howson, who is deputising for the injured Senesi, who could be out for as much as maybe 3 to 4 months. I just feel like I might be tempted to save. I know I've just said I've gone for Robinson rather than Anderson, but Howson's fit and available. He's shown himself in these few games here, by the way. The data was unreal. Like, in terms of his overall goal threat, it's a very small sample size, but he's shown he can do it. So I think I would be tempted to go for Dean Howson as opposed to Kerkez, but I think they're both really, really solid options. The players that I'm really considering outside of Robinson, like if I'm looking to replace Rico Lewis coming up, it's definitely a Palace defender. Because like I said, Rico Lewis has a really nice fixture in 18. But then going into game week 19, this run of fixtures here for Palace is brilliant. And they've really improved recently, both defensively and offensively. I think for large spells of that Arsenal game, they're actually pretty decent. They obviously did lose the game in the end. But I've been impressed with them recently. Munoz is suspended for the Arsenal game, which means he's available from 18. But around game week 19, I really like him. You could bring him in early, right? Arsenal's not, or he's suspended anyway, but then bring him in for Bournemouth, probably not expecting a clean sheet. He's just so attacking at the moment. The numbers have been really good. He's got 0.23 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. And most of that is goal threat. We just said that Milenkovic has great goal threat. Munoz has even greater. So I think for me, Munoz is the standout defender to own, but it's just not quite the right time, obviously, because he's suspended. You do have other cheap options like Mark Gahey, but also Trevor Chalobah, who has started every game since game week 7, and he's only 4.4 million. So again, if you're looking for a cheaper asset from Crystal Palace, you can't afford Munoz, I don't mind Trevor Chalobah. I think they're the main ones that I would be considering. Outside that, actually, Colwill. We keep speaking about having to change the cheap defenders. One person that you just wouldn't ever have to change is Colwill, right? You can start Colwill in basically all of these games right up until like game week 34. There's a couple against Spurs, Arsenal, and Man City you might not want to. And no, he doesn't carry any attacking threat really, like a little bit of assist threat, but you're owning him for basically 2s and 6s. So you need the clean sheets, but the fixtures are there and he is playing for a very decent defence. So I wouldn't mind Colwill as a really safe option to bring in each week. And I kind of feel the same about Konsa. I think the fixtures actually from 19 till 27, 28 are actually a little bit underrated for Aston Villa, but not much goal threat, not much assist threat. And also they've been a little bit disappointing in terms of actual clean sheets this season. So again, I'm less sure on that one. And then the only other one maybe is Lisandro Martinez. The cheapest Man United defender. He started every single game under Emma apart from that first one and then the Arsenal one. But Everton, Forest, City, he's been a lot better in the last couple as well. I actually think he's been one of the better defenders. I think he had a good game against Man City, especially considering Erling Haaland kept pulling onto him at the back post. So, listen, am I expecting him to get you loads and loads of points? Maybe not. But Manchester United have definitely improved defensively under Amorim. I think I've covered all of the defenders there. Basically, I do think the two standout defenders to own, and I'm very biased because this is my plan, is probably Munoz and Robinson. And if I'm talking about prioritising one at the moment, it's Robinson, then Munoz. But I do also like, probably my favourite options outside of that is probably Lewis Hall if you can rotate him. Probably, I would say Colwill for safety. And I don't mind a Bournemouth defender, again, if you can rotate them, because the Bournemouth fixtures are a little bit hit and miss. Like, United's not great, Fulham away is not great, Chelsea away, Newcastle away, Liverpool at home. But in and around that, they've got some great home fixtures against like Palace, Everton, and Nottingham Forest, and then Southampton away. So, yeah, I really think it comes down to your own individual defence. Think about your own rotations. For me, I've already done 8 Nuri to Robinson. My next planned transfer is Lewis to Munoz. Hopefully that helps you, but definitely if you can get to another Arsenal-Liverpool defender without sacrificing too much, that should probably be the plan. So guys, finishing up with the forwards, and of course the reason that a lot of us are looking at forwards this week is for a potential Cunha ban. That's not the only reason, but for a lot of us that's the main reason. Even if Cunha doesn't end up getting banned, and I'll discuss that in a second, it's still worth discussing who are the forwards that we want to own in FPL at the moment. So on the Cunha ban, basically, if you missed it, after the game in game week 16, he elbowed a member of Ipswich staff in the back of the head, then grabbed the member of staff's face and ripped the glasses off his face. For me, it's a definite ban. It's probably a 5-game ban, maybe 3-game, but I would be extremely surprised if there isn't an eventual ban for Cunha. And the FA have charged Cunha, and they've given him until Thursday to respond. So I'm recording this on Thursday morning, so until today to respond to the charges. Now, of course, Wolves could just accept that, in which case he would probably be banned immediately and wouldn't play against Leicester. However, if they were to appeal the charges, then it would probably delay the ban, and the ban wouldn't take place until in the coming weeks, once there's been some sort of hearing around it. So basically, they've got 2 options. Keep the ban as short as what it is first given and don't appeal it, and then he won't play against Leicester, won't play against Manchester United. Or they appeal the ban, he probably plays Leicester, maybe plays the Man United game, but then they risk the ban getting extended due to what is called a frivolous appeal, which is basically the FA are very clearly understanding that they are only appealing it to delay the potential ban from being put into place. So it could go from 3 games to 5 games. There's a lot of hypothesizing going on. I have been told by someone that is relatively close to Wolves that they are highly considering appealing the ban for the reason that I just said, because it would extend it and it would mean that their relegation scrap between them and Leicester, they'd have their best player for that game. So, at the time of you watching this, you might already know, I'm expecting us to get news before the deadline, but let's go on the basis that he is either banned or you just want to discuss which cheap forwards or which forwards in general you should own at the moment in FPL. The only forward that isn't here right now that is worth discussion is Erling Haaland, but he's so much more expensive that I feel like that's an entirely different thing to discuss, which we might discuss later this week. So, let's start with the top two. It's Isak and Jackson. You don't need me to sit here and tell you that, probably. Everyone's looking to bring in Isak this week, and for good reason. He's got comfortably the best data on this list in terms of non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. He's got over 2.5 shots in the box. I like the fixtures. The minutes are good. In recent weeks, if you watch any of Newcastle, whether that be the highlights or the full games, Alexander Isak is just in a different league to any other striker in the league. For me, I just think he is well and truly the best forward in the Premier League at the moment. That's no disrespect, by the way, to Nicholas Jackson, who is definitely up there himself. But Alexander Isak is just something special. He's on penalties as well. I don't know what more you could want from an asset, other than potentially Newcastle being a little bit more consistent, because you do also feel like you're just never sure which version of Newcastle will turn up, but they've definitely improved in recent weeks. So for me, Isak is head and shoulders the best forward to own in FPL, but I do think that Jackson gives him a bit of a run for his money, especially when you consider you can save a bit of money there. I like the fact that he's taken the most shots in the box per 90. He's getting big chances. His minutes have been really secure. Fantasy Football Hub have them as having more difficult fixtures, actually, than Newcastle based on underlying data. I would argue that Chelsea's fixtures are more consistent than Newcastle's. Newcastle got some great fixtures in there, but I like that with Jackson, you can basically play him every single week. The only reason that Jackson is in second and Isak is in third is Isak has penalties, Jackson's on 4 yellow cards, and Jackson is more likely to miss one game. Chelsea fans disagree on this. Some Chelsea fans think that Jackson will start every game. Some think he will be rested in one of the next 3 or 4 for Nkunku. Regardless, because of the 4 yellows, because of the potential minutes risk and the lack of penalties, I can't sit here and say that I would rather own Jackson than Isak. But in an ideal world, you own the pair of them. After that, I genuinely do believe that the forwards are a little bit stinky at the moment. I don't really think there's a standout third forward to own. I would say that for me, maybe third to sixth, I think it's very close. So Wood, João Pedro, Jimenez, Mateta, I love the 4 of them. Why do I love the 4 of them? They've all got, if you can rotate them in the correct weeks, they've all got really good upcoming fixtures. They've got some really nice ones in there where you would expect some good points. All 4 of them are on penalties, and all 4 of them are first choice. So I like that about them. But as you can see, their minutes per appearance this season, none of them have had perfect minutes, especially João Pedro and Jimenez. They both get early subs. Wood is relatively nailed on, but even he does get the odd early sub. Mateta gets a lot of early subs. We've seen that in the last 2 games. He's been subbed off in the 59th minute. And none of them have like standout underlying data, especially Wood and Mateta. You can see here 0.33 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. João Pedro and Jimenez is slightly better, but they've also got lower average minutes. So I think there are issues with all of them. If you told me that all 4 of them start each of the next 5 games, Jimenez is the one to go for. He's the cheapest. He's also on penalties. He's got, for me, the best fixtures, and according to Fantasy Football Hub, the best fixtures as well. It's just whether you think Mane starts one of those upcoming games. So let's just move over to FPL to just take a quick look at that. The dates of the games are, they've obviously got Southampton this Sunday, but they've had a full week rest. So you would imagine that if they wanted to start Jimenez here, well, he's had a week of rest. But then they play Chelsea on the Thursday and then Bournemouth on the Sunday. He could start all 3 of them. I think that's unlikely. If you're looking at the rest time between games, well, it makes sense to rest Jimenez here. Play him in the 2 home games against Southampton and Bournemouth. Make sure you win those ones and then give Mane a start against Chelsea. But I would argue in those more difficult games, Jimenez has shown how good he is for Fulham. So really, surely Fulham want to beat Chelsea, and their best chance of doing that is probably starting Jimenez here. So do they maybe rest Jimenez against Southampton? I would be surprised. Do you know what? I would be surprised if Jimenez starts all 5 of those. If you think he does, then for me, Jimenez is the standout option after Isak and Jackson. And if you think he gets benched against Chelsea and starts Southampton, Bournemouth, Ipswich, then once again, I think Jimenez is in third. The reason I've put him in 5th is because I'm not sure about that. And if he misses one of those good games, and he's getting early subs, the minutes just aren't quite strong enough for me. So that's why Wood and João Pedro are ahead of him, because I would feel more confident that both Wood and João Pedro start all of the next 5 games, but I don't know that. I do like Mateta in a similar way to what I said with Munoz and also Sarr earlier on. It's just not the entry point for Mateta. The entry point for Mateta is ideally in game week 19. Beyond that, you can see here, Solanke and Havertz both have extremely good minutes. Solanke's just not been doing it, though, from an FPL perspective. I don't like the fixtures coming up. When Spurs score lots of goals, Solanke's just not involved in that often. He gets like 5 and 6 points on a consistent basis. He's very consistent, but I feel like I want more for 7.5 million. He's not on penalties. That would be Son. And with Havertz, there are 3 better Arsenal assets than Havertz. Saka, Raya, Timber, Gabriel, Saliba. I'd prefer to own all of those than Havertz. It's like, do I want to block my third Arsenal position? And also, you might want to own Arteta at some point as well, which you might want to have a third Arsenal slot open for. So that's the only reason that Solanke and Havertz are down. Like, their minutes are very good. Their data's pretty good too, but I think I'd just rather like a João Pedro or Jimenez and save the money. There are some other options. Rasmus Højlund. Under Amorim, he's looked a bit better. His data is appalling, like comfortably the worst on this list. But I do think he'll get more goal-scoring opportunities under Amorim. But for me, I'm probably not going to take the risk, even as a United fan. And even as a Rasmus fanboy as well. I love him, but he's too expensive. Like, if he was 5.5, then I think there's a discussion going, oh, he's the same price as Jimenez. He's cheaper than João Pedro. But at 7 million, again, I'd rather own Jimenez. João Pedro would probably. Eva Nilsson, Wissa, both have decent underlying data, especially Wissa. Wissa scored once again in the EFL Cup midweek. I think Wissa will continue to tick along. I just worry about his minutes. The fixtures aren't quite there, and he has dropped off a little bit recently in terms of his underlying data. Gakpo, I'd love Gakpo, but 45 minutes per appearance this season, the minutes just aren't secure enough. Even in the last few he started, he's getting lots of early subs. And Strand Larsen is bottom just because after this week, the fixtures are terrible for Wolves. When Cunha does get the ban, if he gets the ban, yes, Strand Larsen will be the only one that can really score goals in that team. But Cunha is the one that creates for him a lot of the time. So I just think it makes Wolves so much weaker overall. So that is it. I know Duran isn't on here. A lot of people would be interested in Duran. Firstly, I didn't have space for another player. And also, I still don't know if Duran's first choice or second choice. And people say, oh, Duran doesn't need 90 minutes. I'm never going to pick a player that I don't know if they're first choice or second choice. It's just never going to happen. If Duran does start on a consistent basis and Watkins becomes second choice, which I don't think will happen, then maybe I'll start considering Duran. So to summarise that, Isak and Jackson, if you've got the funds, should be your priority. I think Isak, even if you've not got the funds, make the funds available. I think Isak is that good. After that, I think you can go anywhere from 3rd to 6th. So I like Wood, João Pedro, Jimenez, Mateta. I'm hesitant. I think Jimenez is probably 3rd choice if you think he starts Southampton, but just because I'm not sure, I feel a bit awkward putting him there. So honestly, in terms of just a safe option to bring in that scores goals, even though the fixtures aren't there, and even though the data's not there, I'm done doubting Chris Wood. He's shown it on a consistent basis. He'll continue scoring goals. He was inches away from scoring. It was just offside in game week 16. Would have been another goal for him. Yeah, he's just a really safe option to bring in. I'd love to know what your front 3 will be going into game week 17. At the moment, I've got Isak, João Pedro, Cunha, but that, of course, could change. So, guys, there we have it. That is my game week 17 preview. Slightly later, I do apologise for that, but tomorrow will be a double upload day with my team selection and deadline decisions. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.